Okay, picture this. One of the most powerful kingdoms on earth. A cultural powerhouse, right? Now imagine it's about to just completely fall apart. Well, that's exactly what was happening in 18th century France. And we're going to dig into why. So the story kicks off in 1774. A new king takes the throne, and he walks in to find the royal vaults are empty, just totally cleaned out. So you got to ask, where did all the money go? I mean, how does a global superpower just go broke? And right in the middle of this mess is our new king, Louis XVI. He's just 20 years old, he's married to the, let's say, very famous Marie Antoinette, and he's just been handed the keys to the entire kingdom. The only problem? The kingdom's bank account has a big, fat zero in it. Yeah, talk about a rough first day on the job. And we're not talking about just being a little short on cash. The national debt had skyrocketed to over 2 billion leaves. Now, it's tricky to do a perfect conversion, but think of it this way. It was a number so gigantic, we're talking hundreds of billions in today's money, that the government couldn't even make the interest payments, never mind paying back the actual debt. So how on earth did they get here? Well, it was basically a perfect storm of really, really bad spending. For decades, they'd been fighting one expensive war after another, which just drained the treasury. On top of that, you've got the absolutely insane cost of maintaining the court at Versailles. That was a money pit. And then, and you gotta love the irony here, France spent a fortune helping the American colonies fight for their independence. A war for liberty that, would give their own people some ideas. All this borrowing meant they were stuck with loans at crazy high interest rates, digging that financial hole deeper and deeper. But here's the thing. All that spending, that was just a symptom. The real disease, the root cause of all of this, was the system itself. If you really want to understand why France was broke, you have to look at how French society was built, or more accurately, how completely broken it was from the start. This whole setup was called the Old Regime, and for centuries, this wasn't just about who was rich or poor. It was a rigid, feudal system, a kind of legal code that locked every single person in France into one of 3 specific groups from the moment they were born. And that system divided everyone into 3 main categories, or what they called estates. You had the first estate, the second estate, and you guessed it, the third estate. And I want to be super clear here. This wasn't just a social suggestion. This was the law. It decided your entire life right from birth. All right, so let's start at the top of this pyramid, shall we? Let's look at the privileged view. The ones who had all the power, but somehow none of the financial responsibility. So, who were these privileged folks? Well, you had 2 groups. The first estate was the clergy. We're talking about the top leaders in the super powerful Catholic Church. And the second estate was the nobility, the rich land-owning aristocrats. Put them together and they made up just a tiny, tiny fraction of the French population. And what was their single greatest privilege? The one thing that basically broke the entire country? It wasn't just their fancy titles or their huge estates. It was something they got simply by being born into the right family. They were completely 100% exempt from paying taxes to the state. Okay, so we've seen the top of the pyramid. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this massive divide. It's time to meet the burdened majority, which was, well, literally everyone else. And the sheer numbers here are just mind-boggling. Around 90% of the entire population of France were peasants, and they all belonged to one single group, the Third Estate. They were the vast, overwhelming majority of the nation, no question. But now, look at who actually owned the land. The nobility and the church, plus a handful of rich people from the Third Estate, owned about 60% of it. That left the huge majority of people, the peasants, stuck working land that they could never, ever hope to own. And the Third Estate wasn't just peasants. It was this huge, mixed bag of people that included pretty much everybody else, from successful city lawyers and businessmen all the way down to the poorest farm workers. But no matter how different they were, they all shared one thing, one powerful, unifying burden. And yeah, you guessed it. That burden was taxes. They were the only ones propping up the entire country. So let's take a closer look at this crushing weight, the very thing that would end up lighting the fuse of revolution. This quote right here says it all loud and clear. The burden of financing the activities of the state through taxes was borne by the Third Estate alone. I mean, it couldn't be any plainer. The entire financial weight of running the country, The military, the government, you name it, was all on their shoulders, and only their shoulders. And it wasn't just one tax, either. It was like getting hit from 3 different directions at once. First, they had to pay the tail, which was a direct tax that went straight to the king. Then, they paid tithes to the church, which meant giving up a chunk of whatever they grew. And as if that wasn't enough, they got slammed with indirect taxes on everyday items, things like salt and tobacco. There was just no way to get ahead. So when you lay it all out like this, the inequality is it's staggering. You've got less than 3% of the population, the clergy and the nobility, owning more than a third of all the land and paying exactly 0 taxes. Meanwhile, the other 97% of the people are carrying 100% of the tax burden. I mean, you don't have to be a math genius to see that this system was doomed to fail. So, what's the bottom line here? The old regime was basically a system designed from the ground up to make the wealthiest people pay nothing, while the poorest people paid for absolutely everything. It wasn't just unfair, it was fundamentally structurally broken. And that really leaves us with one last massive question. When a system is this broken, when a government is this deep in debt, and when a people are this burdened for this long, what do you think happens next?